So similar to Morgan, I also have a farm, so I try to have a practical practice what you preach mentality. So we have about 60 mama cows in the fall herd, and about was 25 or so in the spring, but we cut it down to 6 last year just because we were worried about what was going to happen with the economy and whatnot. But we've done a fair amount of fencing as well, so we know the importance of making a good plan and trying to be effective with our time as possible when we're out there trying to get stuff done. So, we're trying to look for innovative fencing technologies, innovative fencing solutions. So ideally, in a sci-fi world, we'd have like a push button, the fence would appear and then we're ready to go. But, what do we have to do? What can we actually do? And what's coming in the future for farming operations? So, look at technologies, what's current. We think about mapping technologies. We're looking at monitoring, some of what Jeremy mentioned, and then also some tracking as well. And future, thinking about the future is going to be potentially a virtual fence, one that's on the cow that we can control as well. So looking at what we have. So what do we actually have currently that we can utilize? So one of these being the online mapping or measurement tools. So a lot of times it's going to be quick, easy. What can I do that I can effectively make decisions? So one of them being Google Maps. If I'm looking for something quick and simple, using Google Maps. Another one being Kentucky-based maps. This is inside, I think, the front left-hand side of your folder. Some of that information is. But Kentucky-based maps, they mentioned that as well. So everybody seemed to talk about Morgan. They all seem to talk about planning. So this is what we're going to try to use a little bit. So these to some degree for planning. Then another one that may help even more than these. But these are online quick options. So Kentucky-based maps, Ag Site Assessment Tool with the University of Missouri Extension. And I'll go through the features of each. So in Google Maps, so one of the things we can do is you right-click. Whenever you right-click on something, it's hard to see, but you can have what's here. So that's good for you. You can click on that. It'll give it you a latitude and longitude. So it gives you the X, Y coordinates. And so this can be really helpful when we're working with extension agents, working with different people across the state, and they tell me they don't have an address for where their barn is, or they don't have an address. So a lot of times they give me the latitudes, longitude. They can right-click, provide that information, know exactly where to go. We can meet up at the barn at desired time. So that can be really helpful when working with agents and working with producers and knowing exactly where to go. They're sharing information. Another thing, you click right-click brings up a tool. So one of it is measure distance. So if you just click along the map, and you can actually, it'll give you a measurement distance. So it gives you a summation of the total distance around. So I've used this a lot of times. I'm running water lines, if I'm running fence lines, or trying just to estimate how much materials I'm going to need, how much materials, how much post. This would be a quick, simple method to do that. And then if you go all the way around and complete the circle, it'll actually go ahead and tell you area. So this is however many square feet, but it would be about 10 acres here. So that's you click all the way around, but as soon as you click off, you lose that area feature. So this is in Google Maps. If this is something I want to do quick and simple, trying to figure out something, this would be one way to do it. And you can right-click and clear measurements, and it'll take everything off the map. You can start over again. So the pros is quick and easy. It gives you location and area. However, the cons, we have to think about it. You can't save it. You lose the area. And you can't really do more than one field at a time if you're trying to figure out area. So Kentucky-based maps, really like Kentucky-based maps. I actually printed out, I drew a couple of my fields, printed them out, so I had the area and actually the distance around the perimeter. So, you can again get location. This is for a field in Salvaza. You go through and you can draw. So there's a draw feature within there. So draw feature, you can change your colors, your transparency, and then click on show your measurements to actually give you the area in acres or feet or whatever you want. It can be square miles or however you want to specify it. You can go ahead and then you go ahead and draw your polygon. So you draw that polygon around your field. It gives you the area, which is a little harder to see on this map, but it gives you that area. It gives you the perimeter distance. So it can provide you with some valuable information. And it is fairly accurate. So I used it on a 600-foot water line just to estimate that distance, and it was just about 600 foot of material that I needed. So it'll be fairly accurate. It won't be perfect. It's more of a nuclear unit, but it will be effective. And so for this, for my different fields, I'll get a perimeter, get an area, and do it for most of my fields, and then print that out. So this is a very effective way to just get some basic information. So one of the pros is you can create different shapes and colors, get some delineations there. You can measure your area and your distance. However, you still can't really save, and you can't really export a shape file or KML file for somebody else to use. Another one I like is the Ag Site Assessment tool. And so this gives you a little more information than even the other maps. And so it'll give you area, centroid, hydraulic summary, so your Huck 12, water bodies, your soil types and productivity, environmental data, some climatic data, so your temperature, precipitation, wind roses, but for 7 years. Those are typically for 30 years when we're doing some engineering type calculations, but it'll give you an idea of what's taking place in that area. So this would be some of the information you get, your latitude, longitude, population, density close by. It's really good if you're looking to buy property, I think. Sometimes if you're a little bit unfamiliar with what you're getting into, it could give you some just basic information or basic initial information, and then you can go from there. So this year we had precipitation in inches that you expect throughout the months. It seems like really July, it seems like that should be 0 in our area, but saying 46 inches on average, but that was like 73 inches when we had 2018 and all that rain. But it gives you the soil type, so it gives you a lot of different information on here. And also provides you, if you want to have the wind rows and some other data as well. And tells you where that temperature, some of your information is coming from as well. So a lot of different information, but that's just one of the options that you have available to you. So one of the neat things with this is you can get the geographic coordinate system, so if you need to provide that, it'll also provide you the latitude and longitude as well, and some other information if you're interested in UTM zones and elevation. But one of the cool things is I think you can actually measure path. You actually get the change in elevation, or it gives you a representation of the change in elevation. It won't be perfect, but it'll give you that representation. So if you're figuring out putting in water line, especially, if I'm putting it start out here, it should be able to, where are you starting out, how much length, what changes in elevation you're seeing, maybe if you're putting in water line. How much head did you have to, if you put one at the top of this hill here, how much potential head are you having to overcome? If you had it at the bottom of the hill, well, technically you're kind of neutral. You just had the length of the pipe. But you still have to overcome that initial head when you're doing some of the pumping. So that, it can have very beneficial aspects to it. So this is a tool you can think about as well. So this is still the Ag Site Assessment tool, but you can measure path, and you can also do the measure area, give you feet, perimeter, square miles, meters, whatever it may be. It can also provide you with that information as well. But again, it's free, lots of information, takes measurements and distances, but again, we cannot save it. So, I'm going to keep mentioning this. These are online available tools that we can use quickly and easily. One that I prefer, is just Google Earth Pro. I actually downloaded this to my computer. There is an online version. I don't like it as much. It just doesn't seem to function as well in my opinion. I just went ahead and downloaded this, and I think it provides a lot of good information. So there are, you can save as 2 main file types, the KML and KMZ. KMZ just allows you to save pictures with it as well. So they're the same thing. So it's just the KML plus an embedded image. So if you have something that you're specifically interested at that point, you can show that. So I always save on KMZ files just due to versatility. So 3 main types of data. So it's vector data is what we're looking at. So it's just points, lines, and polygons. So we can draw shapes for area. And so this is actually Morgan's farm. So each one of these points here that she has on the map is actually a different water location. So we can also get length of fence line here. So she has it represented as different colors. Length of fence line. We can get water lines. So she actually put in the water line, then walked it with her cell phone, recorded the GPS points. So if she ever had to share this with whoever buys the property or somebody that comes it later, they could have information on where that water line would be or should be. And then also, helps her divide up the pastures. So this one's feeding into 3 pastures here. This one's feeding into these two pastures. This one's feeding into these two pastures. And so showing how, we could potentially, if we have this, then if we need to do further subdivisions, we can kind of figure out and plan, how best would I split this field. It won't necessarily show some of the topographical variation that we see. So that's not going to be perfectly flat. However, it can help us plan. And we can draw a polygon, figure out how much area is over here, how much area is over here. If we want to create equal pastures or one slightly bigger or larger, depending. So this one gives you a lot of options. So I really suggest, a lot of times to producers, download Google Earth Pro if you want something where you can send to your agents and you can organize stuff into files. So I have everything organized by farm road. So you can put them into, you just drag and drop. So I put them all into folders. So I got one for, it's hard to see, but Brown Road, my Brown Road farm. Have another folder where I dragged it for my Alfred Road farm. And then if I have those files, so you use folders to kind of organize your similar farms and pastures, then you can export that to your county agent. So if I wanted to share, like I have this field or have this layout for my farm, what do you think? They may be able to provide some insight as well. So organize your farms and pastures, then you export. You just right-click on that file folder, the specific field or the file folder, and then you just hit email, and it brings up an email to send that information out to your county agents or to other specialists as well. So this can be really, really helpful in my mind. I also save, a lot of my information within that as well. So within that, every year I try to save my information. It takes effort, but a little bit of time. I like to say, okay, I have my 14 acres, my track ID. If there's my bale counts, if I have, NPK and how much lime is needed. So this one needs about, pH is 5.5, needs about 3 tons of lime. I can't remember the effectiveness of the lime. But, trying to save that information if things are changing over time and just go through and scroll through the different years as well as another subset of my folders. And this is just where we have, in this case, we have a water line. Then at the very end, I show the Ritchie water fountain the last time we had to work on it. So trying to save, putting some pictures to it and also information as well. So that'd be where you have that KMZ file and just be able to have that embedded photograph in there as well. So mentioned monitoring. So Jerry mentioned this, and so talk about as well some monitoring. So we have to electric fence. And so we really need to be out there, so whether he's using it through the Wi-Fi and cell phone, or you get out there with the handheld measurements as well. They have one that has light that you have to visually see. If the fence fails, it'll be flashing. So a lot of different measures that we need to be taking. The one down here is the blade of grass, because you go out there, worst case scenario, go out there with a blade of grass and just see if it's actually going to give you a jolt. So, you really need to make sure it's hot. We got to make sure it's working, or make sure it stays working. And so, livestock I put here are aggressive poker players. They will call your bluff every time. It seems like they just know when it's going to be off, or they're just waiting for it to be off, because the grass is always greener. Doesn't matter if it's the very same grass, but always greener on the other side. So we really, really need to make sure that it is hot. And then, one of the things, exploring, kind of the newfangled way to do it is we're trying to use, to some degree, drones to actually monitor our livestock as well. So they're seeing that there is a potential to use this to monitor our cattle and just inspect our fence lines and scan along through there. So there are some rules and regulations to flying a drone. So we have to, whatever drone we have, for the most part, 0.2 pounds and above, has to be registered with the Federal Aviation Administration, so the FAA. And then, so that's $5, and it's good for 3 years. And so if we're flying for commercial purposes, we really need to have our Part 107 license, which requires us to take a knowledge test and pay $150 and pass this test to fly. However, if we're flying recreationally, we don't necessarily need a license to fly. So if it's fun to go fly around your farm, you don't necessarily need a license to fly. But you still have to register your aircraft with the FAA. And so another good thing to think about is airspace. So I looked here a moment ago in Owensboro. So you do have it seems like you have a towered airport of some sort, because there's definitely a flight restriction. There's Class D airspace right around Owensboro. So that'd be something you really have to think about, and where you are, where you can fly, because you have to get certain permission. If you're within that 5 nautical miles of that airport, technically there is it looks like there might be a 700-foot floor as far, or ceiling, as far as how high we can fly. Technically, we can only fly up to 400 feet above ground level. There are more restrictions when that Class D airspace. So something to think about. So similar, like Lexington has, this would be the 5 miles here, but the radius the 10-mile radius is just for other major aircraft. It's something we have to consider. So if there's airports, heliports, there are a lot of other non-towered airports. Those are ones you just have to keep an eye out for. So technically, there should be a 100-foot buffer between manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft, but sometimes it can be hard to tell. So our upper limit is 400 feet. The lowest they can fly, it should be 500 feet. But it's something, anything that happens, they're always going to blame the guy with the drone, so, or the individual with the drone. But, if we're flying fence lines, this is a 6-wire electric fence they have at the UK beef farm. We can go through there and fly, 1,200 feet in less than 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So really can go fairly quickly if we're trying to inspect fence lines. And really looking for that wind damage. So if there's a big storm event, there's a lot of fence lines or a lot of perimeter fence lines we need to explore and look at. We're trying to fly with a UAV. We want to see where's the damage and to what extent is the damage on the fence line. So just giving us a real quick view and summary of what's going on the farm. So this is 2 or 3 years ago at the beef unit. Another good thing is, when I talk to farmers, and usually it's like, oh yeah, that's a thing. But if we can avoid, when I'd say that we can avoid these, potentially, as long as we maintain visual line of sight, avoid having to go out there, open so many gates, or we can fly over them, that's when they come really interested. It's like, tell me more. So when you're checking your cows or your fence, you can kind of avoid those as long as you're maintaining that visual line of sight of the drone. Or if it's, I think when you see the issue here is mud. Now, does the drone solve the issue? Because you get hung up putting out hay with a helicopter at that point. But, really the issue here is just needed a feeding pad. So that's been resolved. However, sometimes it can be kind of difficult. If you're checking the feeders, checking your waterers, the drone, as the crow flies, for the most part, they can fly 45 miles an hour. So you can go out there quickly, check, see where your hay rings are, see where your cattle are, then fly back to the house, or whatever it may be. So this could be an option potentially for producers at some point here in the future. And so, this is the back of the 70-acre farms. I started out there and flew back to the farm. So I was flying up at 400 feet above ground level, started out there and flew to here, and that took me less than a minute. So I see kind of where the cattle are, know what field they're in, can go out there and check them real quick if I need to. So, or fly a little lower, get some idea of what they're doing and count them and go on with life. So that can be an option. So, there are multiple apps for inspecting your fence line. So I think this was for Android. Drone Harmony was one. For your Apple products, I think you can actually use DJI Go. So it can be one app, and that's a free app. And then your other Apple one is Ground Station Pro, and that's another Apple one that seems to be, I think, more effective in my mind. But pretty much you just set up, have the camera, and the black dot's kind of what's looking at the fence line there. You fly around your perimeter, it's looking down. This one's set up to take pictures. You can just as easily take video. It's whatever you prefer. And it also shows, as kind of Clint is going to talk about here, at some point we have the responsibility to make sure that fence line is well maintained. So then we'd have flight logs and pictures showing that we're trying to maintain that fence. And so something else that happened must have been an act of God or something else. So we can justify that we tried and we're showing diligence, I guess, or that we've been trying to take care of or maintain and inspect our fence line. So there's multiple flight settings. You can change your altitude, pitch setting of your gimbal, the smoothness of your plan, single shot, multi-shot, or video. So there's a lot of different options available to you, a lot of different apps. So this just shows you when you take off my set elevation, I'm flying this field, and sometimes you have to count in for if you have a really big change in topography. I actually like to, instead of just making a digital map, I actually go out there, record my flight path. So those apps allow you to actually record your flight. So I go out there and fly it in exactly the way I want it. It's a little slower. And then I just go in there and change the setting to make it faster the next time around. So I actually record the flight path. And I fly about 20 foot away from any obstacles, power lines, trees, whatever it may be, because of the GPS accuracy. So different satellites are communicating with it. You'll still see, you could see up to about 20 foot variation. So I like to stay at least 20 foot away from any obstacles I could hit. And it'll give you a summary of how many points, your total data. So it'll give you a lot of different information. In addition, when you fly, you get some photos. So what else could be coming in the future? So this is the E-Shepherd collar. They've been working on this for a number of years now, but trying to get it where we don't necessarily, if we have a good perimeter fence, how else can we control our cattle? So this is what they're testing out in New Zealand. It's the E-Shepherd collar, where they get the GPS data from the satellites going to the cows wearing a collar that has both solar panels on there and a processor, microcontroller. And so then it communicates to your base station, which then goes to the cloud and communicates to your smartphone, tablet, or app. And so you can draw boundaries of where the cattle should be. As long as they're within that boundary, they're fine. They get to the edge of that boundary, it starts beeping. They get too far, trying to get outside that boundary, it gives them a little jolt to send them back. So this is something, not quite here yet, and there's a number of different companies working on this. So this is, as long as we've got a good perimeter, but it hasn't quite gotten here yet. So working on that, so something to the future. So maybe interior fences could be this instead of having a hot wire. So possibly in the future, who knows, but they are working on it. Once they start trying to make some money, I feel like they'll get there. So this is something we used to play around with, because we actually used the drones. We were trying to do facial recognition. So I said, cows will lose ear tags, but the face should always be relatively the same, and body style. So we always, this is also kind of like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. And so, but we're doing something similar to Terminator, because we were just having fun as engineers. Like, we kind of nerdy, so we're doing our basic, Terminator research and identifying, which cow is different, trying to use facial recognition. So we can do some facial recognition at this point, but really what gets us is the variation in daylight and Angus cattle. We were trying with Angus cattle because we decided, let's try on the hardest one first, the one that has patterns. So just identifying that. So what research we're working on, and that I'd like to open the floor for any questions. Oh, before I do, something I want to mention is I used to bringing this with me to the fencing school as well. Oh. Okay. So, steeple guns. So they've gotten a little more affordable here of late. I really like this one just because it's including the batteries and the charger and the gun itself. It's about an $800 investment, but in my mind, it's worth it. Because as soon as I go out, because it doesn't have an air tank, it doesn't require any gun, it just takes a battery. And so there are ones I have an air tank version, or one that connects to your air tank. I have this one, and then I have an old-fashioned hammer. And so with this one, I can go up to a fence line as soon as I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or however many staples I want to put in, or 9 wires, whatever it may be. I can do that and walk right on. So I can do about 300 foot with one 20-volt, 5-amp-hour battery. It'll get me about 300 foot, give or take. And so this has been, for me, you used to get done at the end of the day, and your forearm might be a little sore. It just saves you a lot of time and a lot of headache in my mind. So it's worth it. And you don't have to necessarily, it'll drive it in for the most part, but you can change your depth settings. You can change the power level on it. And it just gives you a lot of versatility and speed in my mind. So it's one of those things, I made the investment. I'm very glad that I did. So, it's, because when I was hammering, like we got, for one Christmas, there's 3 sons, and all 3 of us got a 20-ounce hammer for Christmas. And so, we had to go out there, and, I started hammering probably when I was working on fence, 9 or 10. And then, so at that age, Dad came up to me one of them days and said, you hammer just like lightning. I'm getting all proud. I was like, yeah, I'm fast, I'm effective, and thinking this is like you never hit the same place twice. So this kind of solves some of those issues. So I think it's an effective tool, and it really, what was a job that took the whole family, now it's just two brothers, like pretty much going out there, stretching the fence and making it happen. So that can be an effective tool. So a lot of what they have out there, stretching it, not using a tractor, is a lot of those tools now make it like a two-man job. It's a two-man fencing operation at this point. So what was, and that the wives seem happy with that as well. So they can go do their thing. We're just out there fencing. But at some point, I'm hoping to be done.
Are there any other questions?
But Google Earth Pro, download it and try to use it. Yeah. So we're using mostly the DJI, and they have the majority of the market. And so we're using that just because we figured that would be what most likely. That would be what most producers most likely have. And that's what they're buying for their grandson or grandkids as a toy. But we want to think, like, hey, you can also use that as a tool potentially. Flight time is going to be 20 minutes, 24 minutes of effective flight time. It'll go up to 30, but we like to land and make sure we can change it out before it crashes. So we like to leave ourselves a little bit of buffer. But it should tell you when it's going to return. And that's the thing, we actually made the investment, so we'll spend the $2 grand on the drone as opposed to a $100, $60 drone, because that way you can look at whatever you're trying to look at. We can evaluate the fence line as opposed to trying to become a better pilot. So with the wind, we flew yesterday and we flew the day before looking at some cattle. Wasn't really affected. So they'll go up to, like I said, 45 miles an hour, and it'll tell you when there's high wind events. So you could probably go up to 30 mile per hour gusts, but past that you would probably want to land just to protect your investment to some degree. I mean, you could try it. Oh, okay. I mean, it should, and it should be, and you can record that flight path, get it set up, fly about 20 foot from the fence lines, and then go from there. So there is, and it takes an SD card, so you have the video. You can view it in real time on a display screen, or it'll also save to your drone. You have to remove the SD card. So we use the Phantom 4. There's other drones. I think you can. Spark will give you about 10 minutes of flight time, and there's another one, a Mavic. I think a lot of the guys in our ag communications use as well. So the DJI, they just have a lot of the market share, so we kind of just use what they have at this point.